Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Catalyst. I'm here today with Alex, ticker symbol U, and we're going to be discussing a lot of things. The first thing on our docket is Cathie Wood. She just crossed 100 million shares of Ginkgo Bioworks, ticker symbol DNA, and she purchased about 1.4 million on Friday. Now, Alex did a video on Ginkgo Bioworks, I would say about 8 months ago, that has crossed over 98,000 views, and I watched it this weekend. And it's a phenomenal synopsis of what Ginkgo Bioworks is, so I'm going to link it in the description. I have initiated my position because I've dug deeper into them, but most people don't really get what they do. So, Alex, could you give us a little 2-minute summary of what do they do and what kind of is your bull case, and why does your girl have 100 million shares?
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to Ginkgo Bioworks. In a nutshell, they are like a cell reprogramming factory. So what they do is they work with other businesses of all sizes, like the Pfizers of the world, all the way down to people who want to make new impossible meat products and everything in between. And so what they do is they're actually like a cross between an AI company, a robotics company, and a cellular biology company. So they have the equipment and the specialized know-how to build the software and hardware stack to take in customer requirements and spit out cells that meet those requirements, that serve some biological function, kind of like app builders do for software. But in this case, the software is DNA and RNA. That's like the language they're programming in. And
Because
then on
we
the
can
other,
actually program cells in our DNA. That's actually digitizable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there are lots of things to do that you can program cells to do, not just medically, but certain consumer goods, programming cells to taste and bleed like meat, but not be made from actual animals, right? Is like another quintessential example. So the foundry side, when people talk about Ginkgo Bioworks' foundry, they're talking about the robots, the hardware, and the automation that go into taking customer requirements and turning that into a organism that fulfills those requirements. They also have the other half of the flywheel where they take a programmed cell and they use genetic tools to build organisms. So not just cells, but like a yeast, for example,
Right.
that can do certain things, or change the fermentation process in yeast to have a novel output. And do things like that. So they're also building a code library and an organism library of things that can do different things. So the next time they get a customer with a certain requirement, they have they're much closer to the solution from the beginning, right? So the more customers they have, the more, I'm using quotes here, out of the box solutions they can provide in the future to new customers who want similar organisms, right? Which is going to be a big moat and differentiator in 10 years when more of society catches on that more cells can be programmed to do more things, and that cellular biology and artificial intelligence are really converging to make novel products and novel medicines and novel treatments that we really didn't think about in the 20th century. So
right. And so half a century ago, we came up with a way for information to be stored and communicated with each other through bits, zeros, and ones on computers. And now the way Jason Kelly, the CEO, talks about DNA and programmable DNA is that we're quite literally in the infancy of the beginning of this revolution. I mean, we've gotten an Impossible Burger, which is super cool, but that's just one out of the millions of things we could do. Is that the reason you think Cathie Wood sees this as, 100 million shares? Do you think she really sees this as kind of like her next Tesla? She's betting the farm on this one stock being that platform, that iOS app store where everything else is built on top of?
yeah, so the next Tesla analogy is pretty interesting, and I'm just not sure how we would weigh that versus her shares in Teladoc or Roku, for example. But I do agree with the second part of what you just said, which is Cathie Wood, in my opinion, sees Ginkgo Bioworks as the premier platform for programming biology, for programming cells, and that a lot of they will essentially be the platform in the App Store, like you just said, for DNA and RNA, those coding languages, right? So I don't think there's a better bet right now in the public markets than Ginkgo Bioworks, and I think that's why she's going all in, especially while its market cap is well under $10 billion. This is going to be one of those stocks she's going to have 10 years from now. That's going to be one of those big cash-like positions like Tesla is today for her, in my opinion.
And the risk with Ginkgo, do you see as if they make money by having an equity stake or royalties and on the apps that are successful because of their platform, which is where they get the foundry revenue, but the majority of their upside is the downstream revenue? in those equity stakes. If those apps aren't successful, that's where Ginkgo doesn't become successful at the end of the day, right?
That's right. Yeah. So like as with all platforms, like imagine if Apple came out with an app store and none of the apps on that store made a lot of money, right? Like they
Right.
just weren't good businesses. The app store would suffer for that, right? So I think that Ginkgo has this traditional platform model. So we should step away, like as investors, from okay, cellular biology, that's hard to understand and complicated, and just take a step back. This is a platform company that's working in two specific pieces of software or multiple specific pieces of software, but it's biological software. They're programming cells, not programming chips, not programming apps, right?
Right.
Otherwise, it's still a platform company. You know, they win when the businesses that require these specialized cells go on to make successful products and services out of those cells, right?
Right.
So the same way you would want to bet on the Apple App Store or the Android App Store or whatever, that's how you should think about the model for Ginkgo Bioworks with rev share, you know, not a 30% flat fee or whatever. Like, you know, there's some nuance to the model, but we should talk about that separately from the actual cellular biology and how they do the science, right?
Right. And that's why I think they raised 1.6 billion in their SPAC merger a year ago, because they were the largest biotech public company, because they're not a biotech company. They're not a company bringing a drug to market. Because if the drug fails, it doesn't matter. But if you have a platform where there's millions of apps, some of them fail, but some of them succeed, and you get all the, you know, the upside from that as the platform. Because starting a biotech company costs $5 to $10 million on average. Starting a startup to share content costs like $20, right? So like if they can reduce that cost through automation and robotics to be $20 one day, and they have millions of people starting now, which means a lot will fail, but a lot will win. That's an interesting value proposition to me.
Yeah. And just to be clear, that's also a huge moat, right? So like talking about, like, for example, Tesla's gigafactories, that's going to be one of their true moats when everything is electric and autonomous, right? The amount of efficiency that they gain by having a continuously moving, you know, superior from an electrical engineering point of view, battery chemistry point of view, you know, all these other things that are actually in the gigafactories to give Tesla that huge advantage. The same is true for Ginkgo Bioworks. This foundry model, this high-tech automation with these specialized robots for synthetic biology, that's a huge technical moat, right? You can't just go, like, they're going to benefit from economies of scale the more clients they have. That can't just be captured by somebody else going and starting a new synthetic biology company and trying to take a few clients to build like a few bespoke organisms, right?
Right.
Because Ginkgo is making thousands of these things. So they're going to win by economies of scale, and they're reinvesting in automation and more advanced robots and processes. And these are specialized tools, right? This isn't like assembling a car. There's a lot of, you know, biologists and chemists and roboticists working at this company. So it's like the same flywheel that gives them all of these advantages is also deepening their moat, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. It's exciting. It's incredibly exciting. And there's obviously some competitors in the space, but it's you know, it's why I initiated my position, because it's an interesting company, really.
Yeah, I'm excited to see your coverage of the stock. I should do a follow-up video just because it's been so long and the stock is probably near an all-time low right now.
Yeah.
I'm definitely bullish on it. I have a position, full disclosure, I do have a position in this company, a long, regular, normal stock position in the company. So yeah.
Okay. On to our next topic. I wonder, I never got to talk to you about this, so I'm going to be interested to hear your take. Adobe bought Figma for $20 billion. They paid 50 times ARR. Their ARR was about $450 million for this year. So a nice premium. They were last valued at $10 billion in their Series E funding, so 100% premium from then. First of all, did you know what Figma was before this news, and what are your thoughts on them getting 20?
So I didn't know what it was before this news. I think I've actually seen a couple of YouTube videos on it in my feed before this news, because I've been interested in like UI UX design, just like from my old jobs and things like that. But yeah, so I definitely pay way more attention to Figma now after this huge acquisition, and I'm happy to talk all about it.
So Adobe has been around since 1987. They've made Premiere Pro, Photoshop, all this type of stuff. One of the reasons I pay $13 a month for Canva is because Premiere is really difficult to understand. Photoshop, it's not user friendly, and I think most people would agree with that. Whereas Canva is, and Canva is now a $40 billion company. Figma was the leader in UI UX design. They had 66% of their users who were not even, they would not even qualify themselves as product designers, meaning people who are just, they were creating a new niche of people to get into the world of product design just because the platform was web based, which means you didn't have to download some app, and it was collaborative, and it was user friendly, and it was easy to use. Now, Adobe's market cap fell by about $30 billion in the 2 days after they announced this news, because the market, I guess, did not like paying $20 billion when interest rates are nearing some pretty high rates that we've seen in the past 20 years. Do you think Adobe, and I guess more broadly, a competitor, any company needs to do this to a competitor that's going to take them out of business or really challenge them in the coming years? So it was worth paying that $50 billion to eventually get Figma to just shut down.
Yeah, and so just to be clear, I don't think they're gonna shut Figma down. I mean, maybe there's something that, yeah.
They're gonna keep them as an independent company, but not like,
yeah. So there's a lot of things I think people don't really understand about the synergies that I expect that Figma and Adobe will have in the future. So Adobe makes Photoshop. I think everybody gets that. Like Adobe makes Illustrator, and they make Premiere and all these other tools. Adobe actually also owns a company called Magento, and Magento, besides Shopify, is the largest e-commerce platform in the world.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
Adobe owns Magento. Yep. So like, I think they're going to use Figma in a whole bunch of ways to help bring a lot of their services that were not cloud native onto the cloud, like Photoshop, which now has like Adobe Creator Cloud, but like that was really ported to the cloud, not really built ground up to be like a web browser type cloud-based application.
Right.
So I think they're going to use the Figma teams really deep knowledge on that to help bring some of their own products up to snuff. And then separately, I think just being able to have the guys who designed the best UX UI design tool out there on their team to start redesigning their own UIs and UXs, not just for like creator products, but also for e-commerce products. There's a lot of synergy there. I bet we're going to see footprints and fingerprints of Figma all across Adobe's large family of products and services. And then the last thing I'll say, I'm sure we're going to have a good conversation about this, is they paid 50 times this year's ARR, but Figma has like tripled or quadrupled every year for the last like 4 or 5 years. So when you look at it as in terms of like forward ARR, I think it's only something like 15 or 20 times, which is expensive, but it's certainly not 50 times. And if you look 2 years out or whatever, I think it even looks cheaper and cheaper. So I think in a few years, 3-4 years, Figma itself will be close to paying for itself, plus, being super accretive for Adobe as a whole.
That's a really good point. I didn't think of the fact that if their ARR continues to triple, double, or even, go up by 50%, that ARR multiple goes down a lot.
And Figma, if I remember right, the statistic I read is like Figma is the fastest growing SaaS company of 2022, and like up there for like all-time fastest growing if you start from when they started monetizing, right? Like,
do you think that private companies in this market would rather get acquired than go public? Because I mean, 20 billion is nice, but they could have been $100 billion company one day. Do you think it was just like, we'll take the 20 billion?
No, I think it is a nice premium. I'm sure somebody really did the math and said, hey, we can be our own thing, or we can be our own thing under Adobe and be $20 billion richer. I think it really depends. So like, I'm in a bunch of private investments right now. So I hold a bunch of private equity. And basically the message across the board is, hey, we're delaying going public, but it doesn't really change our timetable for like the growth of the business, the product launches and service launches. It just delays when investors can go liquid. And that's part of the risk of investing in private companies.
Right.
But like, what really your plan should be independent of market conditions, especially ones that are out of your control: inflation, interest rates, wars around the world, like big macroeconomic risks. So I think if you are a founder right now and you keep your head down and nose to the grindstone, you're executing the plan you had back in 2021, and then all you're doing is extending your runway by limiting your cash burn, your costs, and making sure that you're following your strategy, I think you'll be all right. I think it's not doomsday and you're looking for an exit, I think the answer is just take longer to go public while staying committed to the thing that makes you a unique business, right?
Yeah. I think also in this macro environment, if someone offers you 20 billion, which is 100% premium, you think about it a little bit more, given we don't know if the next 18 months are going to be crap, and like trying to IPO in this market and like it just flops.
Yeah.
Like you could take 20 billion and go to sleep at night.
Well, and I mean, yeah, so that's true. It's safety in a very risky environment, but it's also like, I bet part of Figma's exit, like one of their planned exits is like, hey, who would really buy us?
Right.
And Adobe is definitely near the top of that list, right? They were definitely disrupting Adobe more than anyone else. So it's like, I think they looked at it and they said, hey, the price is right, but also the buyer is right. This is exactly who we would have expected to buy us anyway. And it's at such a premium, 100% for their most recent raise, but like many hundreds of percents if you look at their like only 2 or 3 year timetable, right? Like the rounds that they raised before that. So I think they just looked at it and said, hey, like, especially in this environment, that's a lot of money, especially since we get to keep being Figma. That it mathematically made sense to take that, not just it was a quick and easy exit, right? Like,
yeah, I think the key now is for Adobe not to screw this up and for them to not like make Figma just a product inside of their product, but like to actually let it be independent. Because then it's a question of like all the designers in the world that love the beauty of this one product being sucked into the Adobe machine. That would kind of suck. If they
yeah,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you got it.
Yeah, so I think they're actually going to do like multiple things with it. I'm sure they'll have a Figma Lite that just gets bundled with their other products and services, right? Like there are a million different bundles you can subscribe to on Adobe through their Creative Cloud.
Yeah.
They'll probably offer it enterprise as a premium standalone product like Figma already does, right? And then everything in between. Like one of the things that they can use Figma to do is kind of like start displacing Canva wherever those two products overlap, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that people are really underestimating all the different ways that this synergizes with Adobe, across the board. Again, not just about UX UI design or, designing great templates, but how the expertise in UX and UI can bleed into their other products, make their other products better, including their e-commerce products, which have a whole bunch of end users that aren't just designers, right? They're people who are trying to set up storefronts, not build apps, for example. So I think this is actually a sleeper banger acquisition by Adobe. They're very smart and they're willing to pay a premium. And just like you said, the other thing they get is they just took one of their biggest competitors that was disrupting them right off the market, right? So it was like a win-win-win-win for Adobe, not just a win-win for them and Figma,
And I think the deal goes through. I don't think it hits major antitrust stuff.
Yeah, I don't think so. Figma's so specific. And I can't even tell you what Adobe's UX UI product is. Like,
yes. Yeah.
So I don't think there's any worry about that.
Okay, on to our third topic. NVIDIA has some event that's coming up that I know nothing about, but you do.
I'll tell you about it, but I actually do have a question first. Are you going to buy shares of Adobe now that Figma is part of them? Or like, how does that change your thesis on Adobe?
Well, Adobe's November 2021 high was 700. They went down to about 390-ish, and then they dropped to like 299 after this Figma thing. I don't use Adobe products as much. I use Canva. If Canva went public, I'm like, all right, I use it. I get it.
Is Canva video or is Canva just still images?
Canva is everything, but I would say images play 90% of what people edit on there over video. I get Adobe. I understand him. I mean, I have a full-time videographer who uses it and he loves Premiere. I never felt this type of emotional connection to it to invest in it. I also never, I don't know. It's like they're a frothy company. They're big. The world is going to get more creative and they're the premier creative product. I just like user friendliness, and Canva to me is like, that's why they just raised that 40 billion, because people want to create and they don't want to have to be experts at Premiere in order to create. But there's always going to be that expert class that really makes high quality stuff, and Adobe's going to be for them. But I'm probably not going to buy the stock.
And Canva is fully only browser, right?
Canva's fully only browser. Yeah,
browser. Okay.
Yeah, that's the other thing I love about them. Also, Canva's search engine for photos I mean, if I search for a microphone, they've developed some AI that will create like literally an infinite amount of variations of microphones. And
Yeah.
so when you need clip art and you need to make a thumbnail, I mean, like it's just this engine of stuff you could search for, and anything you want pops up, and it's
I
beautiful.
wonder if in a couple of years all these stock photo sites will just plug into Dolly and Dolly 2 and just like, oh, you need it to look more like this, add more adjectives, and it just like will use Dolly to create it, you know? Like,
Yeah, that's kind of the scary part of how like creativity kind of like becomes automated, but it's also like,
yeah,
hey, anyone can make anything now. But
that
yeah,
would be
it's
cool. Got it. Okay, so Canva. I actually have never used Canva ever. I use
mm.
exclusively like Adobe products and Microsoft products for everything. So it's interesting to see like
Well, let's
the
let's tell the audience what you really use for your thumbnails, because they're not
so
going to
for
believe it when you say it.
yeah, so for my first like 130 thumbnails, I used Microsoft PowerPoint. And then I finally switched to Photoshop. So if you ever go to ticker symbol U and you check out my channel, anything with those thick borders, it's all done in PowerPoint.
When you
So
said that to me the first time, I was like, "What?
yeah.
PowerPoint?"
PowerPoint actually has some really robust features for being like a totally free, like, yeah, you can click a background and remove it instantly. Like it does all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, in Adobe, you have to like outline the image, the background, move it, all this stuff. Yeah.
dude, Adobe now, I definitely, Figma seems to be for specifically UI UX, and I don't know the power of Canva, but Adobe now does like smart object recognition where you just click a button and it's like whatever you highlighted, it knows where the edges of that object are. You
Wow.
hit a different button, you can context aware delete something. So it's like, I want to delete you from a photo we're both in. It'll fill you in with the right background and it'll look like almost like you really weren't in that image. So like Adobe may not be like super user friendly, but they have a couple buttons that you just cannot replace in any other product or service. So like they're not going to lose this Photoshop battle. They're going to
Yeah.
just figure out how to make it more user friendly, Like
Yeah. I agree.
so
It's the premier product for editors. Absolutely.
yeah, for sure. All right, now we can talk about NVIDIA and GTC. Go ahead.
Well, what is it? What's coming up? And why is it important?
Yeah, so NVIDIA GTC is an event that NVIDIA puts on every year. I think it's the GPU Technology Conference or the Developer Conference. And basically they showcase all the innovations that they have coming out over the next year or so, as well as the innovations they just released. So think of it as like a Tesla AI day, but for NVIDIA. And so they talk about their software, their hardware, and their AI services, but they always do it in like this really cool, like flamboyant way. So it's not like just a bunch of dudes with PowerPoints. It's like they walk you through the technology, usually using the technology itself. So like AI that generates music will generate all the music for the event.
Mm.
So they do all these really clever things. And investors should pay attention to this for two reasons. A, because Nvidia is near the top of the indices. So even if you don't invest in Nvidia or care about them personally, just know that like 4 or 5% of your index fund is actually in Nvidia. They're top 5 or top 10 in the Nasdaq and the S&P 500. Second, a lot of people are sort of asleep at the wheel on the fact that Nvidia used to be a gaming company. And so everyone thinks like, oh, their graphics cards are what they're known for. But in reality, for the last few years, they've been blowing the doors off their data center business. We're talking about a multi-$100 billion company growing that business unit by 40% per year. So, their data center business unit is now over half of all their revenue and still growing by double digits per year. So it reignited them as a growth stock, not just as a really interesting tech stock. And then third, they compete with every major company you can ever think of. So Tesla, NVIDIA makes self-driving car software and hardware. They don't build cars themselves, but they build the sensor packages, the brains, the cloud computers that support the AI training, the sensor packages, everything, right? So I think there's a lot of technologies that you could learn about by doing this one event, by just checking out the keynote, that you may not have been aware are much further along than you think. AI for basically every industry, supercomputing for basically every industry, and then like the computer science behind that stuff, the hardware, the software. So like I think the keynote is either tomorrow or the day after,
And it's
depending on when you
online?
post this. It's online.
Wow.
So like I think you need an NVIDIA account to see it live. Like it'll be on their website, but it always gets reposted to YouTube and you'll know it. It's always like a 10, 12 million view video out by NVIDIA. Like, people should care about this event. It's a big deal.
Is it like Apple's WWDC to an extent?
Yes, yes. It is NVIDIA's version of that, right? Like, NVIDIA's a little more of the like behind the scenes hardware. They don't have as many cool consumer products. So it's like just a little different because it's a little bit of a different business, but it's exactly that. Tesla's battery day, like, you should be putting this in the same camp as those events. And I'm actually lucky enough to be hosting a watch party with NVIDIA officially on one of those panels. So I'm on the climate science and digital twins panel for NVIDIA. So my watch party will be happening this Thursday, and we'll be talking about digital twins and whatever. I'm officially part of the NVIDIA team for that little snippet of the event. I'm a guest, affiliate of theirs.
So is it going to be like a virtual kind of Zoom party where you're like hosting panelists?
Yeah, so it's going to be on Microsoft Teams, which, as you know, is the best social media platform to get a lot of ideas out there.
Absolutely.
So we were very excited about that. But so, all kidding aside, you just register for an account, and then the watch party happens on Teams. And what it is we watch a 50 or so minute panel about Earth 2, which is their supercomputer trying to create a digital twin of the entire world.
Which is insane.
Which is insane.
Crazy.
So it's like, that's the panel I get to be on. And then we get to field questions, me and a few other content creators, from a guy named Karthik Kashinath. Karthik Kashinath is the lead on Earth 2. So like, he is the program lead on the whole hardware, software, computer science stack responsible for digitizing the entire planet. And so we're going to talk about things like digitizing the atmosphere for climate science and weather prediction, supercomputing for things like, correlating real roads with their physical or with their digital twins, and like all these other things you can think of. And then we'll be giving away a GPU, which is pretty cool too. But like, that's the heart of the event. So one of the cool things I really like about NVIDIA is it's not just like, hey, we're dumping information. They want questions. They like consumers being involved. They want to hear what like retail investors and people who just love technology have to say. Like, they're trying to be more community oriented, like Tesla, like these other companies. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, because those Tesla AI days or Tesla product launches, you've got lots of people, not even just traditional finance media, but you've got like the Dave Lees of the world who, that matters when they go out and they cover.
For sure. And just to be clear, Tesla's awesome, right? And everyone loves those events. But for some reason, like, people aren't really too aware that other cool companies, Google does this, Apple does this, NVIDIA does this. So it's like, all I'm really saying is, if you're an investor or just a tech nerd, know that there are a lot more of these cool, kick-ass AI focused, new tech hardware focused events than just Tesla and Apple. Other big companies are trying to take that same vein and do these awesome things with it.
Yeah, which just means more content, more places to cover, more things to talk about.
Dude, and it's like such cool stuff. Yeah, for sure. I'm super excited to cover it.
Well, the market is not super excited about Apple. Last topic of the day, Apple is now officially the most shorted stock on the market, about $18.5 billion bet against it versus $17.8 billion against Tesla. Tesla used to be the first up until 2 days ago. What do you think? I mean, 180, Apple hits 3 trillion. It's at 155, hit 178. Why do you think, even with the iPhone 4s and the $800 Ultra watch, whatever they called it, the market was not excited to buy Apple?
Yeah, so I kind of have like two theses, I guess, on this as a retail investor. The first is just like, Apple, these rounds of hardware updates are way more incremental. So like, they're not as like big of a bang as, if I remember right, it was like the iPhone 10 to the iPhone 11 was like a really big jump, right?
Yeah.
So, maybe retail and institutions felt a little underwhelmed by how not different the iPhone 14 is from the iPhone 13. But in reality, my main thesis is, people aren't shorting Apple because it's Apple. They're shorting Apple because it's at the top of both the NASDAQ and the S&P 500. So Apple is a very safe way to short the market, right? And like,
this makes sense because Apple is 7.5% of the S&P.
Yeah, so when you're short Apple, what you're really saying is, I expect these indexes to go down, but if there's an outlier in the index, for example, let's say Tesla, which I think is top 5 in both the NASDAQ and the S&P 500, has an insane rally, now your short kind of falls apart, because even though the index might be weaker overall, one of its top constituents like made up for that. So instead, what they did is people are picking, Apple in this case, but it could have been Google, just as an example. Actually, I think Apple would be the right thing to short there, because these are expensive consumer discretionary products, as opposed to like Google's very free products that they make ad revenue on to like pay the bills, right?
Right.
So Apple, I think, in a world where people have less purchasing power, things are getting more expensive. It's going to be the iPhones, the earbuds or the earpods, I guess,
yeah.
the $800 watch you just mentioned. Those are the things that people are going to say, hey, maybe I don't need to upgrade this year, right? So Apple should be seeing a lot of those discretionary wallet tightenings hit their revenue first. Another really good thing that I talk about a lot on my channel is Taiwan and China are having geopolitical, animosity, let's say, just to keep this not political. But Apple's chips are almost exclusively made by TSMC.
Yeah.
Apple designs them now, but where they actually get built. So if TSMC goes down for any reason, and there's just another chip shortage, Apple is going to be one of the first companies to really feel that outside the auto industry, because their 3 nanometer and 2 nanometer chips, their upcoming new technologies are handled out of Taiwan primarily. So I think there's a lot of like geopolitical reasons, a lot of macroeconomic reasons, and a lot of other factors going on in this short against Apple. Not that Apple is somehow now a bad company, right? Like, you get to basically point your finger at one well-known entity and say, if the market goes down, so too will Apple, and this is my proxy short on the market.
Now, you're not helping the shorts because you're making a decision that it's quite surprising to me. You are transitioning from an Android to an iPhone. Can you explain why that's happening? And how long have you had the Android?
So I've had this Android phone. I have the Samsung Galaxy Note S20 or whatever. I've had it for about 3 years. My phone before that was a Samsung Galaxy S9, and the last time I had an iPhone was probably like 7 or 8 years ago. The reason I didn't stick to the iPhone was because I like the customizability of the Androids and all that. But then they started coming out with like the notch, which was like the feature at the top of the iPhone screen. I have always, do, and will always think that the notch is a ridiculous thing that exists and a really bad design choice. I was like very anti-notch, and I was like, I'm not getting an iPhone ever as long as they have the notch. So like, conversely, I looked at the iPhone 14, and now their cameras are so good, it's like, this is kind of insane. But the thing that the iPhone 14 changes is they now have this thing called the dynamic island, which is kind of a silly name, but they did away with the notch. So they have like this cool thing that changes the way alerts and like notifications and all these things happen in a way that I thought is like really super clever. And so they took away a design element I really hate, and they replaced it with something I actually really think is cool. And that was enough. Between that and the social pressure of being the only person with green texts, I made the switch.
I just can't believe the notch was the reason. Like, it's
It was
not
the
that
notch.
annoying. It's just, is it that like
It's impossible. Like, dude, I think it's just it takes up so much real estate. It forces this weird aspect ratio. Like, it just bleeds into so many apps. Like, yeah.
So you had
I
an
don't like it
iPhone
all.
before the notch?
I did, yeah. I can't remember like what the exact last iPhone I had, but I've had a couple. I had the original iPhone. I believe I had like the iPhone 5 or 6, and then I
Yeah.
think I had like the iPhone 9. So it's like I had iPhones like periodically. I've been mostly on Android.
So when you switched to Android, did you feel, outside of the green bubbles, any real like a bad, I don't know what's the word for it, like, but did it, was it a basic phone for you that worked, or did it feel weird to have an Android?
No, so like I think Android is actually a fine platform, like everything I needed worked. All of my contacts and all of like my sort of life infrastructure is Google anyway. So like Google Contacts holds all my contacts, right? I don't use iTunes. My device ecosystem isn't Apple other than my phone, so any of that. For example, I build all my content on a PC, not a MacBook, right? So like on and on and on, right? So it's like I didn't really feel like, oh man, now that I don't have an iPhone, these 9 things don't work the same way. Like I assume other people would when they're all on board on the ecosystem.
Right.
But definitely since I met my girlfriend, and definitely since I started the YouTube channel and became like a content creator and a few other things, it now my Android experience is definitely inferior to the iPhone experience. There's certain apps, certain versions of apps that just don't exist on Android. My friends are always getting these feature rollouts that I'm not getting because it's like available on the iOS app before it's on the
Yeah.
Android app.
Yep.
When Clubhouse came out, I couldn't get it because it was, like those things individually like aren't enough of a reason, but they all add up and it's like, dude, I missed Elon Musk talk over here. I can't
Yeah.
get this app over there. Everyone makes fun of me because of the color of my text. This thing, that thing, the other thing, and put together, it's like, why do I do this to myself? Right? I'm just getting the iPhone.
Yeah.
What about you? How long have you been exclusively iPhone or?
I've had an iPhone since 2010 when I got the 4 for my birthday, 13th birthday. And I still have notes in my iPhone from 2010 that I can scroll down to read from 10 years ago or 12 years ago now.
That's all.
So,
So have you been exclusively iPhone since
yeah.
then?
Yeah.
Wow.
Just never
Go ahead.
got the Android.
Are you do you have like an iPad, a MacBook? Like do you have the whole ecosystem or are you really just like the phone?
So that's the interesting part. I hate Macs. I used them for one day and I was like, this is the stupidest thing ever. And I returned it because like after 2 tabs, it would start overheating. I'm like, what's like, this is ridiculous. And like, so, and I got a PC for like, it's the same cost, but the PC was so much faster. Intel iCore i9, all that stuff. So I use PCs. I barely used an iPad. I was sick 2 weeks ago and I watched some Netflix on the iPad, but the phone is just like the user experience of opening up an app and using it is just like it's beautiful, like, and just like holding it is beautiful. Like I just love the iPhone. I've always loved the iPhone, so I can never like use an Android. I don't like the font of the stuff on the Android. I'm just like, I never got into it. And the blue bubbles also help when you're texting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I know that there's like a weird pair of statistics that's like really interesting. It's like I think Android has like a 65 or even 70% global market share of smartphones like around the world.
Yep.
But in America, iPhone has something like an 80 or 90% market share. So it's weird because like I'm on the system with more people.
Yeah.
But in America, I'm by far the minority because I'm not on an iPhone. So it's like this weird, like, well, when I should know more people with an Android and I just don't. Like, I think I'm literally one of maybe 3 people in like my entire social circle that has an Android, like out of hundreds of people, like it's crazy how few have Androids.
And around the world, iPhones are too expensive. So it makes sense for Androids to be like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. If Apple was ever able to make a really cheap iPhone to compete with an Android, which I feel like they could, it would be interesting because there's like this prestige that people have around the world like of having an iPhone, given they can.
I definitely think Apple products, and I don't mean this in any negative way, but they're definitely a little bit of a status symbol. Like the affluent lifestyle is I'm sitting in a Starbucks with my MacBook doing work because I can there. I don't need to be in an office. I have all the most expensive gear, whatever, right? Like, so when you think about like millennial success, like one version of that is definitely parked in an overpriced cafe on your overpriced MacBook with your overpriced phone. And that's fine. Like that's the lifestyle, right? You're signaling that you're successful enough to afford all that stuff.
Right.
Like,
or your dad is rich. That's also.
Or your dad is rich. Yeah. But like, so, I've never liked paying for those kind of status symbols. And I've always seen the iPhone as a little bit of like you can get a much better phone for the same price. But it's like, it's clear that if you value networking and you value ease of use and like getting things first and early, it has to be on the App Store. It will never come to the Google Play Store first. I've never seen that happen, I think.
Even when we built our app and we launched it, it was iOS exclusive for like 10 months before.
Yeah, I've never seen something be Android exclusive,
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, we'll see if the shorts get Apple right. And ultimately we'll see what happens with their market cap writ large. That was our episode.
Go ahead. Hold on. I do have a question for you. Do you think the market is going to go down? Like, there's a Fed meeting happening this week, right? Like, is the market going down? What's going on?
Well, 75 bips are on the 21st. Definitely, that's coming.
You don't think it's going to be 100? You think it's going to be 75?
I would be shocked if it's 100. I mean, like, because inflation we know is peaking, even though the CPI wasn't that amazing. That came out last week. but I don't think they're going to go 100. I think they're going to go 75, see what happens in October. And if we barely get a decline, then I think, but then you got the midterm. So it's like the route should be 75. It goes down, like it went from 9.1 to 8.5. Maybe we get 8.3 to like 8 point or 7.6 or 7.7. And then we kind of have smooth sailing with another 50 basis points up until the new year. Otherwise, we're going to have a crash before the midterms. And I don't know how Jerome Powell is going to think of that. But if he does do 100, maybe he rips the Band-Aid off quicker. I just have no clue if that's going to happen.
I wonder, my sneaking guess is you're mostly right around the midterms. So it'd be 75 here instead of 1, just to cater to the midterms. And then, surprise, surprise, it might be another 75. I think the next one's in November.
Yeah.
So instead of 50. And then I think they have one more meeting in December. Is that right?
Yes.
So it's like we might see a string of like, oh, we thought it should have been 50 by now. It's still 75. Oh, we thought it should be 25, a raise of 25 basis points by now. It's still 50. And so like they're not too aggressive on any one of them, like 1%, 1.25%. But like they're always over meeting after meeting, like what they projected a year ago or like 8 months ago or whatever. And so we're just going to see this. Like if you take the aggregate, it's like these crazy back-to-back, high raises to tamp down inflation. It could be more persistent than we think.
No one thought 9.1, 8.5 was going to give us 8.3 with 0.1 increase. We thought it was going to go down to like 7.9 or something, right?
Yeah, I think the consensus was it was going to be 8.1, which is a decline. And then two things happened. It didn't go down that much. And in fact, it went up. So we were not just like wrong on the number. We were wrong on the direction, which really spooked the market. Like inflation actually went up. So yeah, I'm with you. I think I don't think the true lows are in yet. I bet the lows happen right after the election, January, February. Like I bet we enter a recession. I think the next 18 months are going to be choppy. I think, there's going to be little rallies and whatever, but like I think overall the big trend of the market is still downward.
Yeah, we're only down 17% on the year, which is not really like and we had 360 on the S&P just for a little bit. I think we were down like 25%, and then we just went back up. So I agree with you. I do not think we've seen the real crash yet. The question is when that would happen. Now, the interesting thing is every year since 1950, the year after the midterm year, we have rallied 33%. We have went down an average of 17.2% on the midterm year. So last time was 2020, then 2018. And then the year after, 2019, we're up 32% on average since 1950.
Whoa.
So I'll probably flash that on the screen so people can see that picture. So that means if 2023 we are not up 33%, which means net up 15%, since we might end the year down 17%, then that means, and we have a recession, that would be the first year since 1958 where we're breaking the historical trend of the year after a midterm, we have a big bounce back.
How like, so is there any more like nuance to those statistics, like recession years versus not, high inflation years versus not, quantitative easing or tightening versus not? Like how granular does that data go? Do you know?
It's literally just those years and then the average return or not.
Because I'd be curious if they like could say like, hey, during a recession it was this, not during one it was that, or when the Fed was pulling money out of the market it was this, and when they weren't it was that, because like those factors are all really important, as is inflation at 8% versus inflation at 2%, or however.
Well, that's the anomaly. We're in the anomaly of inflation having 8%.
Yeah. So like I would be curious to see how this compares to the 70s and 80s, which is when they had like rampant inflation and needed to get rates to like, I'm making this number up, but close to 20% to get inflation under control. That was Chairman Volcker, right? So it's like, or Volcker, excuse me. So like I'd be curious to see like how much of the midterm year matters versus like all these other factors that are actually like crushing the market right now. But I'm curious to see, man. Yeah. You might have changed my mind on the 1 versus 0.75% interest rate this time.
You think a 1 is coming?
I would not be surprised if there was a 1. Like I think when people get things wrong on the magnitude, like, oh, it should have been 6.8, but it came in at 7.1. Fine. Like at least it's going down. But when people expect something to go down and it went up, then people are like, wait, I actually don't really know anything. And now I'm scared, right? Because like I thought we were done with this and we're clearly not. Right. So I think that injects some fear to the Fed and they say, hey, maybe it's better to be more aggressive sooner so that we can lay off the gas earlier. But now I'm not sure because I didn't really think about the elections too hard when I was thinking that.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Let us know in the comments what you think. Is Apple deserving to be shorted? Are we going to get 1 or 75? And is Adobe going to be a good stock pick? I think that's my main question. Because I don't know, man. I like Adobe, but I don't know if it's the killer over the next 5-10 years. So let us know what you guys think in the comments.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear what everyone has to say.
All right. Awesome. Thank you guys for listening and watching. We'll see you next week.